Thank you for attending this panel today. My name is Sarah Whitmire. I am social media editor at McClatchy, and our other speakers.
Hi, I'm Kurt Gessler. I'm Director of Digital Operation or Editorial Operations for the Chicago Tribune, mostly digitally focused.
I'm Anthony Quintano. I'm the engagement editor for Honolulu Civil Beat. I'm a little underdressed compared to these two, but I'm from Hawaii, so I guess that's okay. I wanted to thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to join you in this panel.
Absolutely. I like to do the show of hands thing because it's cool. I want to know who's in the room with us today. I would love to know how many of you, just raise your hand if you work in local news. Oh, yay! We're among friends. How many of you guys are local TV news? Cool, okay. What about local public radio? All right, I thought there might be a few. And then who is, I'm gonna say print because I work for newspapers. How many of you are in text-based news or local print news? Cool, very fun. And then my last one is just generally, how many of you in the room are directly responsible for running social? Okay, interesting. Cool. Good stuff. So I pitched this panel, part of why I pitched this panel generally is that I wish that publishers would be more transparent with their internal metrics. When I started in social media, I was running accounts as a one-woman operation. I felt like I was kind of on an island. I didn't know a ton of other people at the time who were doing social media. And I constantly felt like I didn't have enough context for how I was really doing. I had this question of okay, my page is this big. Where should my reach be based on how big my audience is? When I transitioned to McClatchy, and McClatchy, for those who don't know, it's a newspaper company. We have newspapers in 30 different markets across the US. And suddenly I had a fire hose of Facebook data from these 30 pages. Being able to see similarities and differences across all of those pages has literally made me better at my job. So I wanted to get Anthony and Kurt on board, and we wanted to share a piece of what we've learned with you today. All right, what else do I have here? So we're gonna go back to the beginning of this year, and we're gonna talk about some of those Facebook algorithm announcements. The first one came on January 11th. This was the big friends and family pivot. This is when Facebook came straight out and said, pages may get less reach in the future because we're gonna start focusing on content from friends and family. 18 days later, we got another announcement, and this one pertained to local news. This basically, I saw this as Facebook sort of reiterating that they did have a commitment to local news, and independent of what they had announced earlier, local news was still going to be a priority for them.
I want to say one thing. And so before I continue, I think you've given us permission
I've given them permission to interrupt
cut her
me,
off.
because otherwise I will ramble the entire time.
But I tend to jump into conversations a little bit, and we want to kind of make this engaging, so there will be time for Q&A. But one thing I wanted to say is that this isn't going to be a big rant against Facebook. We're just kind of showing the clarity as to the announcements that Facebook has made and what has happened to our newsrooms and our pages since those announcements.
The reality of what we can do. This announcement came 11 days after the other one. This one was a little more under the radar. This was a Facebook business post that pertained to the methodology of how they report organic reach. This one was a real punch in the gut for me. For me, reach has long been the best metric for me for tracking page performance over time. I think of reach as the lowest common denominator of Facebook metrics, because it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a link post or talking about a native video. You can consistently measure reach across all of those post types. So that's why I really liked it, and it was really great until Facebook made this change, which kicked in for all pages, I want to say roughly around February 12th of this year. So the takeaway here, page owners should expect to get less reach. Local publishers, not sure. Either way, we were going to have a lot more trouble tracking what the heck was actually going on. I don't know sports that well, so I got some help with this sports metaphor. If this was a game changer in that if Facebook were a football game, they just moved the goal line. They moved the goal line to an undisclosed location. And also, the field is not measured in yards anymore. It's actually measured now in a brand new metric that you've never heard of before. So this was not cool. This was a problem. It's particularly a problem for local publishers, I think, because it's happened pretty quickly, but it's difficult for me to imagine a world where we as local publishers can do our job without our audiences on Facebook. We're going to get into a little bit later some really interesting reach spikes for the Honolulu Civil Beat that were occurring as their Kilauea was erupting this year, and their coverage of that was very important. to
A
audiences.
wonderful false missile alert
Right,
was
that too.
pretty impactful as well.
More
And
than just Facebook.
Yeah.
And at this moment, our sad fourth panelist, Cal Lundmark, Cal is based in Columbia, South Carolina, and is riding out Hurricane Florence right now, covering that storm with a lot of our McClatchy journalists. In times like this, our pages become like a public service, and I know there's probably countless examples like that from you in this room. Our strategy needs to include Facebook. It's very important to our audiences. That being said, our reach is down. Our reach this year is down about 25%. This slide deck's gonna be available for you guys after, so we are gonna throw a lot of numbers at you in the next minute here. We're down 25% in this year so far. I know that a lot of you may have anecdotally noticed, I kind of felt like reach was going down in 2017 as well, long before Facebook actually made their announcement. And so reach is actually down 28% from January 2017. Our traffic is also down. This is referral traffic to our websites from Facebook. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about the 31 pages in this analysis. We are all local publishers. We are all largely text-based, although we do have very distinct video strategies. Our pages range from about 30,000 likes to over 500,000. And Honolulu Civil Beat is actually a nonprofit. Shout out to nonprofits. The other 30 pages in the analysis are all for-profit operations. One more thing on this page. We decided whether reach was down by comparing the month of January 2018 to the month of August 2018. And that's the best way to sort of generalize what was happening across all of the pages, but it can be a little more subjective, particularly for news. I'm sure you guys, when you look at your metrics, I often see like a roller coaster happening, and that's because we do work in news. Our news cycle ebbs and flows. We have really, really busy news days when our audiences are coming to us for a lot of content, and we have slower news days. So the month-to-month comparisons, the year-over-year comparisons, they can sometimes be a little misleading. So one thing I really like to do is put all of the data on a line graph and then add a trend line. And that's what we did for our 31 pages. I'm going to flip through these really quickly. They start from pages that are trending positively, and the reach will trend more negatively the further we go.
This is kind of fun, by the way.
It probably should be a GIF. All right. That's a lot of line graphs, and that's a lot of negative trends.
It certainly does illustrate what you were saying. All of us in the news business really live or die by the news of the moment. I mean, you're not going to schedule a volcano eruption next year. The Cubs are not going to win the World Series for us. So all these year-over-year or month-over-month comparisons are all very subjective.
There are things that are still working for all of our pages, and I'm going to kick it to Anthony to talk about what's working at the Honolulu Civil Beat.
Yeah, so one of the things, coming from NBC News previously, I had a lot of video experience, and we're a very small team in Civil Beat, and so I brought the video aspect to our team, and I was the live streaming guy. So whenever I could, I would add live streaming efforts, whether it was press conferences, monk seal giving birth to a pup on a beach, or an active volcano. So one of the things that we've seen, and to be a little unfair to everyone else, we've seen a lot of action in Hawaii in the last year. And one thing I do want to note, in our newsroom specifically, we focus on engagement versus reach. And so people sharing our stories, the comments, and we do analyze the comments from positive versus negative, but Facebook Live has been one of the things that's been unaffected for us in the sense that it's helped drive the stories before and after when we do a Facebook Live. And it had a lot of effect. So, but even with that, I think it's the
Kick you
the
to
next one over
your
here.
data.
Ding.
Yeah, so this is our reach, and obviously the spikes you can see are the bigger moments that we've had here. Let me just get this.
Yeah, it's hard to see from over there.
Yeah. The previous year was the monk seal, and the activity we've had this year, we've had a false missile alert, we've had flooding in the island of Kauai, which was delivered a lot of engagement and traffic for us, and then right after that, the Kilauea eruption. And staying on top of those posts, and it wasn't just links to our site, it was also updates on our Facebook page and in our Facebook groups as well.
This really is a fantastic amount of live video. I mean, certainly in the context of the other pages in our analysis, I think we've heard from Facebook a lot, this directive that your posts you should try to hit 25% video, 25% photo, and it's 50% links, I believe, and you know, they're hitting just 25% live video, so that's quite an effort.
Yeah, and we had fewer than 1% of our roughly 10,000 posts last year was Facebook Live, so mix is very strong here.
Yeah, so, and keep in mind, it wasn't just kind of showing all these amazing things. It was my colleague Landis and I, who's in the audience, by the way, and is very awesome at our newsletter and helps me out with social big time. We do office hours every Friday for an hour, and we just banter and answer questions from our readers, and we invite our reporters on, and it brings transparency into the newsroom. And there are days where we have 30 viewers, and there's days where we have 400 viewers. There was no ever clear pattern on the live aspect of it, but we made sure that we were consistent with the live. Even if we had nothing, even if it was just very simple, we didn't script anything, we just sat down and had a conversation, turned on the camera, talked for 15 or 30 minutes, and that was it. And it does help. Sometimes it might not. Sometimes you might get frustrated. You have 2 viewers and nobody talking to you. But the more you keep at it, it really helped us out. Facebook groups. Right when those announcements were made, I think I wasn't the only one that panicked and said, oh my God, we got to create a Facebook group and drive our audience into there, because that's where the only referral traffic we're going to get from Facebook is from groups. So naturally, we created just a generic Hawaii News Facebook group, and nothing happened. The problem with Facebook groups and them being generic and not very specific is that people will join it, but they won't say anything, and they won't publish, they won't interact and engage, and that's kind of been our experience. But over time, especially when the Kilauea eruption happened, we had our Facebook page button designated as visit group. And we saw an enormous amount of traffic to the group and people craving for updates regarding the volcano eruption, not just from Hawaii, but from all over the world. And so that's an active group for us now. One of the other things that we did was we had a lot of success around streaming Hawaiian monk seal on the beach of Waikiki. And this was actually a rare situation. And we had tons of people who just wanted to watch this live stream of this monk seal being raised for a month. And we panicked because we're like, what are we going to do after this live stream is over and this seal swims away? Or there goes our audience with it. So one of the things was like, we got to capture this audience somehow. So halfway through, we ended up creating a Facebook group for the live stream audience dedicated to Hawaiian monk seals. The great thing is there's a bunch of Hawaiian monk seals around Hawaii, and there's a lot of people who are very passionate about them, and it gave them a place to come and talk about monk seals and help educate each other. And we actually have moderators in that group that are from the community, and they do all the work for us. I mean, it's great. It's kind of really, because we're a small newsroom, we don't have the resources to focus our efforts on a day in and day out that groups require. So we're lucky enough that we have a few passionate people in that group that are willing to do the work of approving users and making sure that the posts stick to the rules. So that was a huge thing. That wasn't necessarily a referral traffic drive, but it built a community around our brand, which was very important. Instant articles was a big help. Over time, this was something that was not instant. We actually saw no effect and even a little downturn in the beginning, but over time, slowly but surely, instant articles did help. We're actually kind of in a position now where we've actually turned off instant articles because we're experimenting right now because we actually wanted to use instant articles for subscriptions, so we wanted to use the CTA within instant articles. We saw a little bit in the beginning, but now we're not seeing any effort, anybody subscribing via the instant article CTA. So we said, let's turn it off. My colleague said, let's turn it off and see what happens. We're getting this weird kind of weekend effect. So keep in mind, we're a very small news publisher. We don't often publish on the weekends, so that kind of gives us a 2-day gap of content to share. So we're seeing this weird effect on Mondays where we're getting that, I guess that's the 24-hour hangover of lack of publishing on a page where we get very little reach and traction. And that's kind of more recent that you're not going to see on this, but we'll let you, if you guys are ever curious, my colleague Landis Kearns, you can follow on Twitter. She will keep you updated on how we're doing.
What about Monk Seals, the group?
Oh, so we're up. So that group is like over 1,000 people right now. Now for us, we're, again, a small publisher in Hawaii that, not widely known, is a very good number for us.
All right, I'm going to talk about what's happening at the state on behalf of Cal. Outliers. Outliers are a big thing. The graph I'm going to show you next, the outlier kind of smacks you in the face. Every once in a while, posts on Facebook still do really, really well. So this is 20 months of reach at the state. This is that single video post is responsible for that spike. This is Frank Martin. You may have even seen this video. Frank Martin is a men's basketball coach at the University of South Carolina. Go Gamecocks. And if you are parents and you have kids in youth sports, you might understand a bit of why this blew up. It's like 3 minutes of Frank Martin ranting about how parents shouldn't coach their kids from the stands. And this was a really, really, really engaging topic for like Facebook in general. The audience on this video is far beyond the audience that the state has themselves. So this graph is actually net new likes on the state over like 24 weeks. We looked at the 12 weeks of audience growth before the post went up, and then we looked at 12 weeks after. Sorry, it's a lot of text. A lot of people would tell me that's too much text for a slide, but I really like fine print. Mostly what we saw, that spike that you're seeing, we saw really, really aggressive audience growth for about a week after that post went up, and then it totally dropped off. It was like it never happened. We had completely reverted back to the typical audience growth for that page within a week's time. And what's really interesting to me is that giant video post, it still picks up about 100,000 reach every week or so, and the audience is not picking up still. That being said, it was still a very profound spike. I mean, that single post, we estimate they added about 5% of their overall audience as a result of that extremely popular post. So all of that audience growth occurred in 1 week.
That's a lot of benefit to that one outlier.
And outliers are fantastic. They do still happen. We can't strategize around outliers. So that's the issue. That's one of many issues.
So one thing we do is we make sure we pay attention to, because there's no way to really know that something's going to happen and how it's going to react to people. So a good example, we had a building fire in Honolulu, and it was, we had, I think, about 3 people die in that fire after the fact. But, at first it was, we're an investigative newsroom, so we don't jump at breaking news, at every little breaking news thing. But there was something about this situation, this high-rise fire, especially coming not too long after the big fire, I believe it was in London, where a lot of people had died. So it was a still fresh situation, and we jumped at the chance at just streaming what the situation was, and we had a big impact from that, just covering and live streaming that. We had people all over the world reaching out to us, like, just thank you for streaming, thank you for streaming.
Now we have some things that are working at the Chicago Tribune.
Some of it. Some of it, other things, we still have some challenges, there's no doubt about that. So like this chart at the beginning here is kind of like really encouraging because we actually saw our reach go up in this window, which is, somewhat a little bit of a surprise. But we still have the same big challenges. We're still a local news publisher. And when you look at some of the other metrics that we focus on a lot, we still have the same issues that everyone else is dealing with here. For us, well, thank you. I'll just do this.
Okay.
For us, we do a lot of measuring of link clicks. We're really trying to get consumer-based revenue, and that referral traffic, even though Facebook has said we're not about referral traffic, is still tremendously important to us. So we look at our average link clicks, which certainly are more affected by virility and those outliers, and our median link clicks, it's still not a good story. It's the same story that most local news publishers are going. So what I'd like to share next is some of the strategies that we've done to kind of normalize the median post-link clicks and certainly kind of maintain reach in spite of all this stuff. I do also want to shout out to my partner in crime on this, Elizabeth Wolf, who is somewhere in this room, but I'm not allowed to point at her. I'm sorry. She's here somewhere, though, so you may want to find her, and she's wearing a lanyard. So one of the things we did is actually we're nerds, so we did this twice. We analyzed post message length. So the first thing we asked ourselves was, can you write Facebook posts that are too long in a link-based system? A lot of the advice is really, write short, write crisp. Oh my God, you're not using 3 emojis? No, that's it, that's all you can use. So we focus a lot on our long-form journalism, our long-form narratives. You cannot summarize some of these stories in a sentence. So we said, well, can we do this? And in all cases, we've found that in a long look at kind of where posts fall for an entire year, as well as an analysis of like the top 50 posts and a bottom 250 posts, we found that, yes, absolutely, that even though it truncates, that length for our audience, and what I'm speaking for is just for our audience. I'll talk to you, the methodology, I want to share this data to encourage you to go look at it for yourself on your pages, because this is all going to be different behavior. But for us, we found that some of those top posts are our longest. I mean, it's 3, 4, 5 paragraphs, and we built these into the planning for some of these project-based journalism. This was really good for us. So like, for example, of this top 50 thing, we had a 155 character average Facebook post and a median of 140. Personally, for social media measuring, I like medians a little better than averages because they kind of squish the outliers down a bit. But the top 50, we had an average character length of 174, and the bottom 250 was actually below that. So from our perspective, we found an audience that was willing to read more, and we were able to kind of convey the best part of our journalism there.
That was super surprising to me when
Yeah.
you first showed that to me. I was like, that's counter to a lot of what I thought.
Yeah, so, and again, like, run the methodology, do this stuff. We'll get into kind of how to do this stuff later. Another thing, and Elizabeth being many things, including the master of the pivot table and conditional formatting, we looked at paths on our site as well. Now, for us, paths are a really good proxy for topics, as they are for a lot of news sites. So I don't know how well you can kind of see it up there, I'm a little old. But like sports, entertainment, stuff like that, so these all fall into these categories. But we found that, I mean, the first thing we found was really a surprise to us, but it shouldn't have been. Our Facebook audience is not our site audience. You can't think of it the same way. You have to program towards what this audience, our 575,000 Facebook fans are. And we found that things like opinion did okay on Facebook, even though they did better on the site. Yet things like suburban Chicago news, hyper-local news, when you look at well, I don't want to touch anything here. We should have a pointer. When you look at that green slice around the reach and link clicks, what people really clicked into most, and the highest reach was suburban, local suburban news, that hyper-local stuff. That was what they really did, and yet that is dwarfed by sports on the Chicago Tribune. So that we kind of adjusted, okay, let's share more of these, let's share fewer of these, as we're trying to kind of focus on what this audience really wants and try to serve them. This is a very easy exercise to do once you get to the tools and kind of conquer them, and it takes conquering. Another thing we did, and this was a game changer for us, and this is still something that was really important as a way to really disconnect those two audiences. So we ran time of day. For us at the Chicago Tribune, we want to, on weekdays, we're trying to drive that conversation in the morning. So we're holding off kind of enterprise stories. We're like, okay, Wednesday morning at 5 a.m., we're going to post this big story on the site. And at first, we were posting the same big enterprise story at 6 a.m. And we're like, wow, man, they're always doing terrible. So we started to look at when we should be posting those stories. And we found that you want people are on Facebook when they get home from work, when they're done with dinner, and when they're sitting home on the couch, maybe they're breaking out their phone and interacting with it. But that 5 to like 10 p.m. range was our peak time. So what we started doing is taking some of our best journalism and be like, okay, I know we published it on site at 5 a.m., but you know what? We're going to wait. We're going to publish this at 5 p.m. or maybe 3 p.m., get the commuters. And this was something that was jarring in the newsroom. What do you mean? Post it right now. My God. And we're like, no, trust us. Look, this is a plan. This isn't Twitter. This isn't email. This isn't we think this is when you're going to have the highest chance for success. So run these numbers. Look at the cadence of when you're posting and what that time is. It really is an important way to maximize that great journalism you're doing. I say journalism. If I say content, throw something at me.
I know, I do that all the time, too.
Thank you. Another thing we're doing now, and I have to be honest, I'm still, we're midstream on this. Give me another month or so to publish something on Medium on this too. But we really focused a lot on recirculation. So in 2017, we put about 9,700 posts up on Facebook. And we'd always heard from a lot of different people that, you have evergreen content you should be recirculating on Facebook, or that same story you did a year ago, you should post it again or something like that. But whenever we did it anecdotally, it always sunk without a trace. So I'm like, it's time to do some kind of methodical study of what sharing the exact same link is. So what we've learned here is that when I looked at that sample size of about 10,000, there were about 1,000 posts that involved a first or second or third sharing of that. Now, before I get too far, I want to say this. If something is on mission, you should share it as many times as you want to. If you have a great enterprise piece and this is going to save people's lives or involve a monk seal, and I want one on Lake Michigan, share it 10 times, right? You shouldn't, that's what you should be doing if it's on to maximize exposure. For us, though, we have a lot of choices and a lot of options, and we want to make sure that we can maximize reach and link clicks. So rather than sharing something we've shared once or twice already, we should share something new. So for us, we really want to see that. And when we found that 89% of the time, when we shared a link a second time, a link post to a link post, 89% of the time, it considerably underperformed the original posting. So 1 time out of 10, we saw more reach or more link clicks, or both.
One thing I want to add is that for a small newsroom like us who doesn't publish, how many articles would you say you publish in a day?
About 200 roughly across wire and local.
So to give you a perspective, we're a small newsroom. We publish maybe 5 or 6 a day, to give you an idea. So one of the things that we try to do is reach back, and we don't want to do something that we say shared earlier in the week. We'll reach back a little further, just so that how everyone says that you don't see a post for 2 or 3 days. Some people at some time, so we don't want anything to kind of double up in any feed. So there's some stories that have done well for us that we reshared 2 or 3 times out of the year that are evergreen, like why people park backwards in Hawaii is something that gets shared on a regular basis, and it goes gangbusters for us every time we share it. And that's I think a couple of years in the running that story's been in our system, and it's just one thing that surprises people over and over again.
One of the things we've also tried to do on the second post is maybe do a different post type, because we've seen that a native video with a bit.ly link will perform differently than just that second thing here. But 100% you should look at this. I'll give you a few examples of kind of things that we've seen here, and I'll try to get my eyes around seeing some of this stuff. So here's a good example, very simple. Where you see 50,000 reach and about 1,000 engagements, and those clicks, that's not link clicks, that's overall interactions there. So you see the first post is over here, 50,000. The second post here has 5,000. Now you might say here, well, Kurt, that first post, look at the photos, really engaging. The second post is a screenshot. Sure, it's up here, and whatever, about 24 hours later, but there's obvious reasons why that one underperformed to the first one. But then you look at this one here, where the first sharing of this got, a reach of more than 250,000. The second one had a reach of 14,000, separated again by about a day here, but that's roughly the same thing. There's no reason other than Facebook's own algorithm basically finding that first, the best audience, the second best audience, the third best audience, Here's another one, and this is a really interesting example here. So the first share here on the left has a really strongly written kind of narrative lead in here. Did super well, reach, clicks, link clicks, and stuff like that. But the photo, frankly, is not ultra compelling. The second share here, which basically sunk without a trace, had a much more compelling photo. The second one here, this is the one you would think on the right, the second share that would do the best. It follows all the guidance, be crisp with your lead in and stuff like that, but it just did nothing. Another one here where you saw, really, again, same photo, little better lead in, little long lead in. The only difference is this is the second posting of this link click. Second posts don't have nearly the audience potential as does that first share. And this one I like the best because it's literally the exact same post message text, the exact same photo. That first share did fine. That second share had one sad little thumbs up, and that's it.
Everyone's had that happen.
Yeah. So just note that, if it's part of your mission, do it, but expect this to not do as well. So here's what we did. A lot of these things, post message link, paths and stuff like that. What else could you analyze? Post type, frequency, parse the text, headline, day of the week, referral subscriptions. You could do anything like this. This is just what we did, what we wanted to know. We're asking some questions of our data and kind of getting our answers here. I encourage you to do whatever makes sense for kind of what you're doing here. Big takeaway, at least from my perspective, is your Facebook audience is not your site audience, 100%. Study your platform audience the same way you study your site traffic. The same approach you take on your site is probably not the same approach you take on Twitter, Apple News, or Facebook, or push alerts, or email alerts. Each platform has its own rules of engagement. You do not own Facebook. You may want to accomplish certain things, but you're still owning, it's their parameters and it's their game 100% of the time. Then determine what your goal is. For our goal, it's subscription-based, it's referral traffic. We want to see link clicks. We care less about reach. Reach as a potential audience is very important. We don't care as much about impressions. We want to see people click through, go into the system, and pay us for our great journalism. 100%. So once you determine your goal, then track it. Traffic, if it's traffic like us, track that. If it's exposure like reach, track and measure that. The problem is the biggest stumbling blocks is the tools that Facebook provides are fundamentally flawed and one of the biggest stumbling blocks to this.
And that is what's not working. Here's our big number. We actually looked at about 500,000 rows of data, roughly, that number, to everything that you just saw in this presentation up until this point. We used the Facebook Insights Exporter tool. So we're talking about nearly, and definitely was over 1,000 because I definitely screwed up at least 6. So more than 1,000 individual spreadsheets to show you all of the data that you've seen so far. The reason that is because we want to look at reach. When we're talking about algorithm changes and reach is the thing, we want to look at reach. Reach is the most reliable way to gauge what's happening that you don't control. That is not, 1,000 downloads for that much data is not okay. These tools do not work. And I should add the caveat, these are the free ones that are, the free analytics tools that are at our disposal. They are flawed. This is the biggest flaw. Even before Facebook started tweaking its definition of reach, it's never been easy to really get data out of here. Publishers are left to do a lot of grunt work to get their own metrics, and this is the grunt work. It remains one of the more frustrating user experiences that I encounter anywhere on the internet. And it mostly comes down to the 500 post limit. You can only bring 500 posts out of this tool at a time. If your page posts every half hour, every day, the entire year, you are looking at 35 individual spreadsheets to get a year's worth of reach. 35.
And by the way, it's all in Pacific time, too.
No, I know it's not. Oh, that's weird. I think I have a question. I have a theory on that. We also I have major issues with just the how you select a date in this tool. The date range selector doesn't limit your selection to 500 posts. You're picking your date blindly. So if you overshoot it, if you pick a time frame that has 510 posts, Facebook will just randomly pick 8 that you don't get It's not going to tell you how. It's going to make you guess at how to actually get a 500 row limit. And for me, if you haven't been able to tell so far, I'm a little neurotic about data. And I mean, if I'm going to go to this much effort to analyze data, I want to analyze a complete data set. I need every single every single post the page put up in my time frame. I need all of that in my spreadsheet. My data is only as good as the set is complete. So it is incredibly frustrating to simply get a complete data set out of this interface. I'm going to take you back to Facebook Reach at the Honolulu Civil Beat, because I think that when you look at that insights tool, like probably a lot of you in this room, you're going to be tempted to use CrowdTangle instead. CrowdTangle historical data is fantastic. It's so great to get one spreadsheet all at once. Some of what we've looked at is we've compared, since we had the reach data anyway, we compared average Facebook reach to average CrowdTangle engagements over the same time frame. We wanted to see how these two data sets would differ when looking at the same body of posts. So we're going to dive back into those spikes. We do know that both of these spikes were due to live video for the Honolulu Civil Beat. And I just wanted to put those numbers in front of your head, or in front of you, just to get a sense of how they don't check out necessarily. It's a little bit strange that reach would be so much lower when engagement was so much higher. And I think throughout 2018, we've heard a lot from Facebook about meaningful interactions and how engagement would be a new and more prominent indicator for placement in the newsfeed, priority in the newsfeed. And we know these algorithm changes aren't done. They're ongoing. Who knows which metric we get to pick next, or not pick next, but metric we use next to determine how we're doing. But this engagements metric is fluctuating still quite a lot.
So I wanted to jump in real quick. One of the biggest reasons why I chose to join Sarah on the panel is that we wanted to be transparent. And one thing that I used to do, there used to be this Facebook group, and some of you might know it, it's infamous, social journalism, right? Every once in a while, I'd take a screenshot of our insights on Facebook and share it in this group and be like, we're seeing this. What are you guys seeing? Nobody else would share their screenshots of insights. Mm-hmm. We need to be helping each other, because the more information, so I let Sarah into our Facebook page, and she
Literally
dug in out all this data. I didn't have any influence on to what she pulled. So I think more to the reason is that we need to kind of help each other here, inform each other on what we're all experiencing, because I'm sure everybody in this room is getting something different. And what works for us is not going to work for you. It's going to be very unique. So the more that we can work together and share this information with each other, whether it's a Slack group or Facebook group, I'm sure Sarah at the end is going to share some ways to connect with us. Let's help each other out.
We've got this blue line. The blue line represents average reach. The green line represents average monthly engagements. I just think it's very interesting how the spikes kind of switch places. I mean, the engagement spike really mirrors the previous spike they'd seen, except it's engagements now instead of reach. It just kind of flip-flopped. And then one more view with these line graphs, just because, man, line graphs are the best. They're just identical. These are different data sets from different analytics platforms. They're showing average performance for the same page over the exact same time frame, and these lines are pretty different. With everything going on in this chart, comparing these two things, I think the one takeaway that I do have is that engagement right now is not a proxy for reach. This line graph tells us that pretty definitively. We can see very clearly that engagement is trending up, and then we see that reach is trending down. So keeping on why this is so hard, graphs are not always helpful. I've shown you a lot of graphs. I love graphs. I mean, when you're looking at a data set, it's just black and white numbers. You can't tell what's going on necessarily. The data visualization is where you can really have a trend pop out. These graphs are from CrowdTangle Intelligence, which is a really nice tool for a lot of reasons. The one is El Nuevo Herald, is the Spanish language publication out of Miami. And then on we've got Fort Worth Star-Telegram there. Looks pretty similar. That's growth in page likes over the same 20-month time span that we've been talking about so far. They look pretty similar to me. But I'm sure you guys have heard about the common data viz no-no known as the cropped y-axis, and that's what's actually happening here. El Nueva et al. Grew by about 12%. Fort Worth Star-Telegram grew by 48. This graph wouldn't necessarily show you that. And the CrowdTangle intelligence page absolutely has this percentage listed on the page. You scroll down and find it, it is there. I think that a lot of what happens when metrics maybe aren't your strong suit is that you see a graph and you just instantly have a feeling about it. And when the tools like this do things like misrepresent the data or represent the y-axis in an inaccurate way, it leaves you with an inaccurate read on what happened. And then here's a screenshot from Facebook Insights. This is the state's Facebook Insights, their Reach tab in there. And you know, that outlier, it just really kind of messes up this whole graph. I can't tell at all what's going on here. And whether you have an outlier like this or not, I know you've probably played around with the Facebook Insights portion, this Reach tab. It's just not set up to show you anything happening long term. I mean, it's really good for like this week. It's really good for comparing this week to another week. But if you want to do something like try to detect an algorithm shift over the course of 8 months, 8 months does not look very good in Facebook Insights. It's not the most useful interface.
You have to download the data yourself every time.
Yeah. So as we talked about, I mean, this is 31 pages. This is a drop in the ocean compared to all pages on Facebook. Our reach is down. Yours might not be. We have shared our numbers. We want you to run yours and do the same. You don't have to do 500,000, I promise, unless your page is really active. I have a step-by-step guide that I put up on Medium. You can find it. I linked to it on Twitter. I can't get my computer on the internet here. It's just like cursed. So I will eventually tweet out, we're going to tweet out the link to this slide deck. We're going to tweet out a spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet, Google Sheets, that has the exact same reach data that you saw in all of those line graphs. And then we're also going to share a link to our new Slack team. We have a Slack team. It's called Sharing Social Metrics. And since this data, I really love this. I love analyzing data, and I do not have a stats background. I do not really even have a math background. And you don't need to, is my theory. So I would really love for you to check out the step-by-step guide. Give me your feedback. Let me know if you run into issues, especially that part, because we want to help. We want us to talk more. We want to share more about what we're doing. And it's going to make us all smarter at the end of the day. I'm pretty certain of that. And we have, happily, about 20 minutes for questions. And we would really, really love to hear maybe what data analysis is working in your newsroom and what questions you might have for us.
Questions, experiences, everything.
Oh, yeah, and there's a mic in the middle. Good call.
If you could introduce yourself too, where you're from, what name, be great.
My name's Nicole. I'm from Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Just work at the local newspaper there. Question's not about data at all. I'm interested in some of your experience on Honolulu with Facebook Live. You mentioned you came from a TV news background before that. No live experience in my newsroom, including myself. So I'm wondering, how did you combat connectivity issues, if you had any of those? And what tools and training did you provide to your newsroom?
Well, right off the bat, you can't combat connectivity issues. But it's a great question. Oahu has a lot of black holes when it comes to cell service. What's interesting is the TV networks, the TV stations in Hawaii, don't use sat trucks all that much. They actually use live views, which relies on cell service. So even they struggle at times with coverage. What I've done is, over time, identify the places that I can't stream. And I'll do that in my spare time. I go to the places that I know I'm going to go, like the Capitol building, the mayor's office and stuff like that, and I'll actually test in advance. Or I'll just keep note of places that I've been to and know where there's good self-service and not. And even for our events, when we try to live stream our events, I'll try to do the same. Log which places don't work so that you don't waste your time during a breaking news situation or anything like that where you want to go and run a live stream. You just know in advance that you're just not going to get signal. We don't have live views. We can't afford them. They're just too expensive. So we have cell phones. We actually have shared cell phones in the office. I try to share, how to do live streaming from the newsroom. We're lucky on occasion where the Capitol will live stream. or the governor or whatever will do a live stream and will restream their broadcast on our page. So in that we use Wirecast. We actually will pull that stream through the office into our feed. That's pretty much the only way we combat it. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Training, how do you teach other people to go live? You try to grab one or two people that are willing and interested. I try to avoid the big cold newsroom, let's get together and show you how to do it, because most of them won't. You try to teach them on occasion. I'm usually out in the field with a reporter. The reporter will then show interest, and I'll kind of show them in real time. How do I go live on the phone? How does it work? Instagram stories has kind of been very helpful in the sense that doing Instagram stories kind of gives you the sense of, and I try to get them to talk on camera versus just showing what they're seeing, to explain what the viewer's about to see. And that kind of gives them an aspect of being on camera, because I'm sure a lot of us have people who just don't want to be in front of the camera. One thing that's been very important is responding for our lives to people in chat. You can be showing something that's happening and be behind the camera and engaging with people by just talking to them, and they respond and they will stick with you. And that's been very successful for us, is responding in chat, whether we're in front of the camera or not.
Hi, I'm Marcus. I'm from Viceland Australia. It's a partnership between Vice and Australia's public broadcaster. My question's about sharing versus cross-posting within a family of Facebook pages underneath the one brand. So we have about 16 Facebook pages that belong to our public broadcaster, and whenever a video is created, we allow cross-posting to all pages. I'm wondering what best practice is, because it seems that the jury is out on whether or not it's always best to always cross-post, and whether it's sometimes best to sometimes share. Because if you share, there's like it's a branded post for that particular page, and you'll also concentrate the engagement to one post as opposed to it appearing as various separate videos across all of those pages.
We've had limited experience cross-posting. We've enabled that across some of the Chicago Tribune, Baltimore Sun, back when we have data from the LA Times. We've not measured it. Honestly, it sounds like a great question to frankly ask of the data. So I would love to know how that goes, and that's one of the things I have, but I don't have enough data in-house to tell you how successful that is. Anecdotally, what has your experience been?
We tend to cross-post. One thing we have noticed is, though, if somebody likes the post, so likes the video, they'll then follow the page where they see the video has been posted, and not the attribution link in the cell. So it's a loss to the page creator, but they'll get better reach because more pages shared it.
So we have I did a little bit of analysis for the Miami Herald on, and it wasn't specifically shared video posts, but we saw a very surprising hit to reach on the share itself. Like, so there was an existing post, maybe of like, say, a smaller page, like a sports page, and you have the main page share that sports page post. When that sports page was just, their audience was getting off the ground, it was a great way to grow that audience right at the outset. But the hit to reach that those folks were seeing on their shares, it was substantial. And I do think what you brought up, though, is a good point. Like, the original post does get a boost at that point. I think what I would worry about is how much time had elapsed between the original post and the share, because I wonder how that would play around with your metrics. And I can tell you from the cross-posting perspective, we cross-post across all 30 of our pages. I really like the interface a lot. When it first came out, I was like, this is exactly what I needed. And it breaks here and there, and the caption files are kind of sketchy. But I enjoy that a lot. I think what I would be looking for next, CrowdTangle does a phenomenal job of parsing out which video is which. The stuff I'm getting from Insights at the moment, they're just calling them videos.
Yes.
kills me. So I actually have relied on CrowdTangle for a lot of video analysis for that reason. So that's one thing to consider as well.
We've had decent engagement on our end. So we have our reporters do regular TV hits at a local affiliate that's our media partner. And we have them cross-post to us. And not speaking to their page, since I don't see their insights, but as far as our page goes, since we don't normally, we try to do as much video as we can, it helps us to have that content. We do see increased engagement on those posts on occasion when they see our reporters on that video feed.
Just quickly, because you did ask for an anecdote, and I realize there's a bit of a queue behind me, so I'll keep this quick. We actually offer our content to anybody, even outside of our organization. They want to cross-post it. In fact, we had this incident last year when our best performing video, it got about 27 million views in Australia, was pirated by maybe someone in this room, because it was a Texas page. It was like, I won't say who, but it was just outright pirated, and they got 58 million views on the pirated video. And our legal team was angry, and then I said, well,
When was this? I'm curious real quick.
it was last year.
Oh, it was last year, okay.
And I said, well, they don't appear to be responding to our legal threat, so why don't we just offer them the original via cross-posting, and therefore they get a high-quality video because they haven't had to rip it and crop it to get our bugs off the corner. And then we get to actually track it, and it contributes to our overall video views,
Nice.
and it's all legal, and everyone's friends at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we've since done that because we found that this particular video and various others that go viral are tracked, but when you can track it in the back end to lookalike videos, and then we just go out and we say hey, we've seen you've stolen our stuff. It's all good. We don't want to send you a cease and desist letter, but we'll send you a cross-posting activation link. And they're like, oh, okay. So I can stand here and say, if anybody wants our stuff, you're welcome to it. So just come find me. I'm the Australian guy here, and we'll produce
Thank you.
And Americans tend to love Australian documentaries. So
Tweet in our hashtag so we have your info.
yeah, just come find me. So it's all yours. Cheers.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing real quick. Sorry, not related, but as far as Honolulu Civil Beat goes, we made the decision when Facebook made their announcements to not focus on Facebook as much and keep Facebook going, but focus on our newsletter subscriptions and try to increase donor support. And so the big focus is our newsletter now, and we continue our efforts on Facebook, and we use it kind of more of as a guide and a monitor as to how the community is, because they still discover Civil Beat through Facebook. The goal is to try and get them from Facebook and become loyal readers on our site. And we don't necessarily try to do that through referral traffic anymore. We just try to do it directly as much as possible. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I'm Hersanthi Croy from the Fayetteville Observer in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Sorry, I didn't, you say it a little louder?
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. I'm Hersanthi Croy from the Fayetteville Observer in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I was wondering if you pulled any data on demographics, because I love hearing from Peggy every single day on our Facebook feed and in the comments, but I'd really love to hear from someone else, and how would I reach that new demographic?
I know that demographics, you can't get those from Insights Exporter tool or any of that. Not that I've seen yet. I have pulled some stuff out of just the people section in Facebook Insights. That's really interesting because we have the poor Myrtle Beach Sun News. The Myrtle Beach Sun News, God bless them, their Facebook handle is just Sun News. There's also a Sun News in India. There's also a Sun News in Nigeria. So even though it's Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the top countries for their audience are both India and Nigeria. They're just confused, It happens. So that was one really quirky thing we found out looking at that demographic information one day. I know that a lot of what we've heard from Facebook is trust us to find the audience for your work. The whole algorithm shift is toward users. If you're interested in the Cubs and you like video, those two indicators, that's a Venn diagram in the middle, you're gonna see that video about the Cubs. That's what Facebook is promising us that they will do. And I don't have a good answer for that, but it is the exact right question.
The demographic study we've looked at looks at subscription conversion, and we use a different provider for some of that. We don't rely on it quite as much on Facebook.
It's meager. The offerings are meager.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Groves from Drury University, and I had a question with regards to Facebook groups, and just wondering if in your analysis, did you do any comparison in terms of Facebook groups versus Facebook pages in terms of engagement and reach and referral traffic?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, we have 1, 2, 3, Tribune has 4 public groups. You can nod in the front row, or is it 5? None of our groups are more than 3 to 4 months old. So right now, we're viewing our groups as kind of engagement opportunities, way to connect. We really like the notification interface, trying to build conversations. They were, in the data I showed here, they were excluded from all of these. We know that there's insights available once you get more than 50 people in your group that you can do that, but we have not tracked any of that stuff yet. I don't know, I mean, the scale of success for Facebook groups right now is so low. I mean, like, you have, I was speaking at a Facebook conference earlier this year, and there were people talking about, like, groups of 1,000 being, this is really successful, and I'm like, oh my God, we have 500,000 fans on Facebook. It's got to be higher than this. So ours are experimental. We've got between like 800 and like 1,200 in some of these groups. Some of them are really nice, and they're really great ways to have conversation with an author, with a fan base, or we did one on Chicago history and stuff like that, that are kind of extensions of things we're already doing. But A, they're too young in my mind to track referral traffic, and B, I'm not sure if they're ever going to be a real good place to like be relied upon as a massive driver of traffic. So that is my experience there.
Yeah, I would avoid comparing groups to a page when it comes to referral. Don't even rely on it. Really strictly see it as an engagement kind of brand awareness of who you are. But really it's an engagement play for us to try to reach people who may not necessarily like our page, but want to talk about the topic. It's a very different audience, and it's a very difficult audience to build. It requires direct attention all the time, even more than a page, I would say. So just keep that in mind, that it's a very different beast in that it's great for engagement, and depending on the right topic, you could strike gold and have a huge group form. We created a bunch of groups in the hopes that people would just join. That did not work. I just started off with generic ones like each island, right? Let's, generic all about Oahu, all about Kauai. People would join, but they don't engage at all. You can post something and they don't respond at all, and it's very difficult to nurture that. And so to find a topic that people are really passionate about, that's the core of a group you should create and focus on. It shouldn't, and you should not compare pages to groups.
One last quick question was, on your pages, do you do only your content, or do you curate content from around your
We avoid it. We try to avoid it, at least, using our content.
use a mix?
Meaning, we welcome even our competitors, like, share the Star Advertiser articles. We'll even share our competitors' articles in there once in a while, because we know it's not going to be, we're not going to get thriving traffic from this at all. The idea is to stir conversation. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times there are things that we don't cover, but it's a hot topic that should be discussed. That'll be posted in the group.
100%.
We really, we see a lot, some of our newsrooms do that all the time, and it's the smaller ones, and it's fantastic. It's those Facebook pages really become like the town square for the community. I think in particular about the Bellingham Herald. Bellingham, if you know it, Bellingham is the northernmost city in the contiguous U.S. It is way up there, and it's a pretty small town. That page, however, has like it's near the top for engagement rates across McClatchy. I love to remember that. Like, the smaller audiences are often more engaged, and that is a paper that does that all the time. They'll share, a post from the county sheriff. They'll share that directly. And I don't know, I like that about them. They do really well. But our bigger pages don't do that hardly ever at all.
Hi, I'm Emily Ludostansky, freelance currently, previously digital product manager at Community Impact newspaper. My first question is actually based on groups. How do you inject your brand when the real goal is engagement in those groups, but you also kind of want to build your brand recognition?
So we try to, I try to avoid being like, hey, Civil Beat, if there's a question and that question could be responded by a story that you've done, that's the opportunity to inject your brand or introduce your report. I try to get the reporters into the groups. You're not gonna, naturally, they won't do it. You just kind of nudge an opportunity where there's the right question or the right comment that's left in a group where they can then jump in and talk to that person, whether it's a story tip or to carry on a conversation. You do it authentically. Don't purposely be like, hey, sign up to our newsletter. Won't work.
So it's very subtle.
Yeah.
Got it. And my second question actually has to do with kind of these one-offs with live video or, a volcano. Are there any steps that you all take that tries to gather some of the audience from a one-off viral video other than kind of just invite to like your page? Is there anything more that publishers can do to gather audience from those kind of blow-up stories?
I definitely think jumping into the comments is absolutely. As soon as something is trending for our newsrooms on CrowdTangle, we'll sometimes set a pretty low trending threshold, and because that's the indicator. Those are the posts where it's worth our time to get into the comments and
Get into it as the publisher or the reporter or broadcaster.
Yeah.
both. Yes, all of the above. Yeah.
People, I feel like people relate more to people. So I think that works more than the news brand itself. And you got to remember, your reporters are the representation of your brand. So that should be considered brand engagement in a sense.
Heavy brand response on social is often jarring. Like I remember, when if we're like on Chicago Tribune Twitter and we like something from that, sometimes the next time you see, oh my God, Chicago Tribune just liked my post. This is too much. So I think this is definitely social media is much more of a people to people environment.
And we are a little bit over, but I want to hit this gentleman's question because he's the end of the queue. And I think we're down to all stay. And if you have any other questions, we can stay and chat.
I'll try to be quick. I'm David Purdy from KTOO Public Media in Juneau, Alaska. We're historically a radio station and TV station, and as a result of that, a long time ago they created Facebook pages for all the channels, which is kind of a poor metaphor for how we do things now. So these are decaying and inactive pages that don't have we have a primary one that's we put a lot of energy into.
Yeah.
Do you think we should be merging these, or is there a downside to? So my theory, hear me out on my theory, and then tell me I'm wrong. Is that we're sort of staking out that brand territory, partly so nobody else takes it, partly so people can find it, so that if they search for the name of one of our channels, they don't come up empty.
Again, when I said about determine what your goal is, if your goal is just put a stake in the ground and make sure you're there and have that, then don't roll them up. We did over the past 3 years roll up a lot of them because Facebook has really squelched the potential audience a lot of these smaller pages can get. And sometimes you're just, as much effort as you can pour into it, you're just screaming into nothing. Plus, we have seen times where we had a really good example of the Chicago Tribune business page. This has been managed different ways over time. Sometimes it would go months without being loved, and then people would post a lot, and then at some point, there's almost this magical point of no return, where no matter how much love you pour into a page, you can never get it back to where, why is no one seeing this? How can this have zero reach? This isn't even possible. So if your goal is just to have a stake in the ground where someone can search and find your page, do it. Otherwise, we had great success, and Facebook will facilitate roll-ups, and our advice right now is use the main brand accounts as much as possible. There's so much headwinds to succeeding at all on Facebook. The chance of you succeeding in 20 places is unheard of. So I would say roll up unless your goal is just to have that.
Awesome.
Thank you,
all
guys.
so much for attending. Run all of your numbers. Share them with us. I'm so excited to see them.